In the suburbs of Philadelphia,
Amy sighed
and looked at the sleeping stood in a
faces of her
quiet
new
residential area. In the kitchen, where the morning sun was streaming in, Amy Johnson was hurriedly preparing breakfast. "Zach, it's time to wake up," Amy called out towards the second floor. Amy, 35 years old, was moving about busily, her slender frame topped with soft blonde hair. She was a dedicated social worker at the local Child Protective Services. The sound of footsteps running down the stairs announced the arrival of her 8-year-old son, Zach. "Good morning, Mom." "Good morning, honey." "Breakfast is ready," Amy smiled gently. At the kitchen table, Amy's husband Greg was already seated. "Morning, champ," Greg greeted Zach. "Woof." Their beloved dog Max joined in the morning greetings. The golden retriever was an important member of the family. After breakfast, Amy hurriedly got ready. "I need to stop by Whole Foods. We're out of ingredients for dinner." On her way to work, Amy made her usual stop at Whole Foods Market. Inside the store, fresh vegetables and fruits were colorfully displayed. "Amy." It was Sarah, who lived in the neighborhood. "Can you make it to the next PTA meeting?" "Yes, of course. I have some ideas about the school library," Amy replied with a smile. After finishing her shopping, Amy headed to work. The Child Protective Services office was always wrapped in a busy atmosphere. "Morning, Amy," her colleague Jennifer called out. "How did that thing from yesterday go?" "Oh, that suspected abuse case. It's still under investigation," Amy answered with a serious expression. After a day's work, Amy returned home looking tired. In front of the house, her neighbor Tom was mowing the lawn. "Hey, Amy." "Good work today," Tom waved. "Thanks, Tom. By the way, I'm looking forward to the barbecue on Saturday," Amy replied with a smile. As she entered the house, she saw Zach doing his homework. "I'm home, Zach. How's the homework coming along?" "It's okay, but math is hard," Zach said, looking a bit troubled. "Well, let's take a look at it together after dinner," Amy said kindly. While preparing dinner, Amy realized how much she cherished these moments with her family. It might seem ordinary, but to her, it was irreplaceable time. The next morning, Amy woke up earlier than usual. She was leaving for a week-long child welfare conference in New York State. "Greg, please take good care of Zach while I'm away," Amy reminded her husband. "I know, don't worry," Greg answered, sounding a bit irritated. Amy frowned. Lately, she had been noticing subtle changes in Greg's attitude. Maybe it's stress from work, she thought. While packing her suitcase, Amy peeked into Zach's room. "Honey, can you manage with Dad while Mom's away on the business trip?" "Yes, I'll be fine," Zach answered, looking a bit lonely. "All right, make sure you go to school properly. And don't forget your piano lessons," Amy said. Amy picked up Max's collar. She had heard news about dog thieves in the neighborhood recently. "I'll attach a GPS tracker just in case." She attached the GPS tracker to Max's collar. "Now I can feel at ease." At the breakfast table, Greg suddenly said, "By the way, I'm thinking of doing some home repairs while you're away. Oh. What kind of repairs? Amy asked, surprised. Part of the roof is damaged. I'm planning to call in a contractor. Amy felt a bit uneasy. That's sudden. But are we okay financially? Don't worry. I'll take care of it, Greg answered, seeming a bit irritated. Amy nodded silently, but anxiety was growing in her chest. Just before the taxi arrived, Amy gave her family some final words. Everyone, take care. Zach, listen to what your dad says, okay? Zach nodded slightly. Max wagged his tail to see her off. Greg just nodded silently. Amy felt something off about his expression, but the taxi was about to arrive. Well, I'm off, Amy said, forcing a smile and waving. As the taxi started moving, Amy felt a tightness in her chest as she watched her family's reflection in the rearview mirror. It was a strange sensation, as if she was leaving something important behind. Several hours after Amy's departure, Greg sat on the living room sofa with a deep sigh. An unnatural silence hung over the house. Zach, are you ready for school? Greg called out towards the second floor. Yes, Dad. I'll be down soon, Zach's reply came. Greg unconsciously reached for the whiskey bottle on the table. He knew it wasn't good to drink alcohol in the morning, but lately, he couldn't control himself. Hearing Zach coming down the stairs, Greg hurriedly hid the bottle. All right, let's go. In the car on the way to school, Zach noticed that his father's behavior was different from usual. There was a faint smell of alcohol on Greg's breath. Dad, are you okay? Zach asked worriedly. Shut up. Greg suddenly yelled. It's none of your business. Zach fell silent in shock. His father had never yelled at him like this before. When Zach returned home from school, the situation had worsened. Greg was clearly drunk, lying on the sofa with the TV volume turned up high. I'm home, Zach said in a small voice. What, you're back already? Greg answered irritably. You've got homework, right? Get to it. Zach hurried to his room. Max followed him, looking worried. At dinner time, Zach sat at the table nervously. Greg was even more drunk, his hands shaking as he held his fork. Dad, when is Mom coming back? Zach asked fearfully. In that moment, Greg's expression changed. What, you can't manage without your mother? He threw his plate on the floor. I'm sorry. Zach cried out in surprise. Max started barking and stood in front of Zach. The dog was clearly trying to protect him. You damn mutt. Greg kicked out at Max. Stop it. Zach cried, tears streaming down his face. That night, Zach couldn't sleep out of fear. Max lay next to his bed, seemingly on guard. The next day, Greg said he was going to work and left the house. However, it wasn't clear if he really went to his workplace. Late in the afternoon, Greg returned home. He was clearly drunk and had a new bottle of whiskey in his hand. Zach, where are you? Greg shouted angrily. Zach was hiding in the closet, his body trembling with fear. Max was with him. Suddenly, Greg's cell phone rang. He hurriedly answered it. "I know. Tomorrow night, right?" Greg was speaking in a low voice. "Don't worry about the wife. I'll take care of it." Zach didn't understand the meaning of his father's conversation, but he felt like something bad was about to happen. After hanging up the phone, Greg was pacing around the living room, looking even more irritated. "Damn, I need to finish this quickly," he muttered. That night, Zach noticed his father's behavior becoming even stranger. Greg was going in and out of the barn repeatedly, seeming to be searching for something. Max was constantly by Zach's side, trying to protect him. However, Zach was worried about his beloved dog's safety too. "Max, I wonder if we'll be okay," Zach whispered, hugging the dog. There were still 2 days until Amy's return. Those 2 days felt like an eternity to Zach. Amy's taxi slowly entered the residential area in the dim twilight. Having finished her week-long business trip, her heart was excited about reuniting with her family. However, as they approached the house, she began to feel something was off. "That's strange." Amy frowned. Their house, which should normally be brightly lit, was unnaturally dark. As the taxi stopped, Amy quickly got out. Heading towards the entrance, she tried to reassure herself, suppressing her anxiety. Surely, they must be out somewhere. As she put her hand on the doorknob, she heard a faint sound from behind. Amy turned around. "Zach," she gasped. In the dim corner of the garden, in front of the barn, she could see a small shadow trembling. Amy put down her luggage and hurried towards the shadow. "Mom!" A thin voice was heard. In the dimness of the barn, Zach was sitting, trembling. As Amy approached, she could see a large bruise on her son's face. "Oh, Zach. What happened?" Amy tried to embrace her son. At that moment, Zach uttered unexpected words. "Mom, are you okay?" Amy was speechless for a moment. What do you mean, if I'm okay?" Zach continued in a trembling voice. "Dad said he was going to take care of you." A chill ran down Amy's spine. She gently grasped her son's shoulders. "Zach, what happened? Tell me everything." Zach started talking, his face on the verge of tears. "Dad was scary. He drank alcohol and yelled. He touched the bruise on his face. This too." As Amy listened to her son's story, she was overwhelmed by a mixture of anger and fear. "Greg, you..." She gritted her teeth. Suddenly, Amy realized something. "Zach, where's Max?" Zach's expression changed. "Max. Max." He choked on his words. Amy peered into the barn, anticipating the worst. What she saw made her want to scream. In the corner of the barn lay Max's motionless form. "Max!" Amy rushed over and touched her beloved dog. But he was already cold. Zach, why? Amy asked in a trembling voice. Zach answered, crying, Dad gave him lots of chocolate. Amy was stunned. Everyone knows chocolate is toxic to dogs. And yet, Greg had. Mom, Max was trying to protect me, Zach continued. When Dad got angry, Max barked and Amy hugged her son. You did well telling me, Zach. It's okay now. However, Amy's heart was in turmoil. Her trusted husband had abused their son, killed their dog, and was even trying to take care of her. Where is Greg now? Amy asked quietly. I don't know. He hasn't come back since last night, Zach answered. Amy took a deep breath. First, she needed to ensure her son's safety. Then, she needed to deal with this situation. Zach, let's go inside. You need a shower, and we'll treat your injuries, Amy said gently. As they were about to stand up, they heard the sound of a car engine in the distance. Amy tensed. Mom, Zach said in a frightened voice. Amy gripped her son's hand tightly. It's okay, Zach. Mom will protect you. She steeled herself for what was about to happen. What should she do? What could she do to protect her family? A plan of action was rapidly forming in Amy's mind. Amy carried Zach into the house, almost cradling him. The sound of the car engine faded away, but her tension didn't ease. Zach, wait here for a moment. I'll be right back, Amy spoke gently to her son. She hurriedly got in her car and headed to the nearby CVS pharmacy. The bright fluorescent lights in the store stung her tired eyes. A first aid kit, disinfectant, and some pain relievers, Amy said in a low voice at the counter. The cashier looked at her face with concern. Are you all right? Amy forced a weak smile. Yes, just a minor injury. Back at home, Amy started treating Zach's wounds. Every time she saw her son's swollen face, her heart ached. Zach, just a little more patience, Amy encouraged her son. After the treatment, Amy made a decision. We're going to the police. This is a crime. At the local police station, Amy explained the situation. However, the officer's response was cold. There's insufficient evidence. If it's a domestic issue, you should try talking it out first, the officer said matter-of-factly. Amy felt indignant but tried to maintain her composure. But my son is injured. And our dog. I'm sorry, but we can't act at this point, the officer repeated. Dejected, Amy left the station and nearly broke down crying in her car. At that moment, her cell phone rang. Amy, are you okay? It was her best friend, Sarah's voice. Amy confided everything to her. Then, Sarah made an unexpected suggestion. Actually, I recently got licensed as a private investigator. I might be able to help. Amy was surprised. Sarah, really? Yes. Let's start by gathering evidence, Sarah said in a serious tone. Back at home, Amy followed Sarah's advice and started searching Zach's room. She found a notebook under the bed. Zach's picture diary. Amy flipped through the pages. There, Greg's violent acts were recorded in childish drawings and writing. Amy couldn't hold back her tears. This will serve as evidence, Amy renewed her determination. With Sarah's help, Amy began investigating Greg's past. The more they dug, the more shocking facts came to light. "Amy, look at this," Sarah pointed at the screen. It showed Greg's criminal record. He had served time for fraud and assault. "I can't believe it." Amy was speechless. As they investigated further, it became clear that Greg had been after Amy's assets even before their marriage. He was a habitual offender who targeted children from wealthy families. "So that's why he kept asking about my savings," Amy muttered bitterly. Sarah placed her hand on her friend's shoulder comfortingly. "Amy, this isn't your fault." The two also pondered the reason why Max was killed. "For Greg, Max was an obstacle," Amy said sadly. "Max was trying to protect us. That must have hindered Greg's plans." Sarah nodded. "Dogs have sharp instincts. Maybe Max had seen through Greg's true nature from the beginning." That night, new information came in from Sarah. Greg had been seen being intimate with a young woman at a local bar. According to the bartender, Greg was bragging to the woman about getting a large sum of money soon, Sarah reported. Amy bit her lip. "He must mean our savings." As all the facts came to light, the anger and sadness within Amy grew. The image of her husband that she had believed in was a complete lie. "Sarah, what should I do?" Amy asked, looking lost. Sarah looked at Amy with a serious gaze. "Now is the time to take action. With this much evidence, the police will have to move." Amy took a deep breath. "Yes, you're right. For Zach's sake too, I can't run away anymore." The two began planning to visit the police station again the next day. Amy had a feeling that this would be the beginning of a new life. It was frightening, but at the same time filled with hope. As Amy and Sarah were gathering evidence, a circle of support from the local community began to grow. One Sunday morning, Amy gathered her courage and visited the local church. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce a new member," the pastor spoke kindly. "This is Amy." In a small support group, Amy began to share her experience with a trembling voice. The people around her listened to her story with sympathetic and understanding gazes. "You're not alone," an elderly woman gently held her hand. This experience gave Amy new courage. She resolved to raise her voice not only for herself but also for others in similar situations. As news of the church incident spread around the neighborhood, the entire community began to support Amy and Zach. Their neighbor Tom voluntarily started night patrols, and other neighbors took turns keeping watch. "Let us know if anything happens," Aunt Betty from next door said. "We'll come running anytime." Changes were happening at Zach's school too. His homeroom teacher, Mrs. Jones, contacted Amy. "I've been concerned about Zach's behavior recently," Mrs. Jones said over the phone. "His drawings and essays have been showing signs of anxiety at home." Amy blamed herself for not noticing the changes in her son, but Mrs. Jones comforted her. "You're a good mother. What matters is from now on." That night, Amy's case was reported on the local news program. Under the title, "A Domestic Violence Victim Speaks Out," Amy's courageous actions were praised. This report might encourage many victims to find their courage, the news anchor concluded. Amy cried as she watched the TV. These weren't tears of sadness, but tears of hope. She strongly felt that she was no longer alone. Empowered by the community's support, Amy revisited the police station with the final piece of evidence, the data from the GPS tracker she had attached to Max's collar. This data shows the time when Max was taken to the barn by Greg, Amy explained to the police officer. The officer carefully examined the data and nodded with a serious expression. This will be crucial evidence. Combined with the other evidence Amy had gathered, the police finally moved to arrest Greg. The arrest took place at a local bar. "Greg Johnson, you're under arrest," the officer declared. Greg, who was in a drunken state, attempted to resist but was quickly subdued. At the police station, Amy watched as Greg was brought in. When their eyes met, Greg shot her a hateful glare. "You'll regret this," Greg shouted. Amy's hands trembled, but she maintained a resolute attitude. "You can't threaten us anymore." After the arrest, Amy immediately initiated divorce proceedings. At the first hearing in court, she bravely took the witness stand. "The defendant repeatedly inflicted physical and emotional abuse on me and my son," Amy testified calmly. The judge listened to Amy's story with a serious expression and nodded. "I commend your courage." As the divorce proceedings progressed, Amy began receiving counseling at the local domestic violence support center. "Overcoming trauma takes time, Jane," the counselor spoke gently. "But you're on the right path." With each session, Amy gradually regained her confidence. Zach also participated in therapy for children and slowly began to smile again. One day, after counseling, Amy confessed to Jane, "I want to help other victims." Jane responded with a warm smile. "That's a wonderful idea. Your experience will be a source of hope for many people." Eventually, Greg was sentenced to prison time. The ownership of Amy and her son's house was also completely transferred to Amy. On the day of the sentencing, Amy let out a deep sigh of relief. "It's finally over." Sarah hugged her shoulder. "No, Amy. This is a new beginning." Amy nodded. Indeed, this wasn't an end, but the start of a new life. Her eyes shone with hope for the future. On a peaceful Sunday morning, a year after Greg's trial, Amy and Zach were excitedly preparing to welcome a new family member. "Mom, can we go see him now?" Zach asked with eyes full of anticipation. Amy smiled gently. "Just a little longer. We'll go together when everything's ready." The two headed to the local animal shelter. Waiting for them there was a young, friendly-looking Labrador. "Buddy, come here," Amy called, and the dog approached, wagging its tail. Zach carefully extended his hand to Buddy, who gently licked it. At that moment, both of them felt a new bond forming. On the way home, Amy was lost in thought. She had recently started volunteering at a local support group for domestic violence victims. If my experience can help someone, she thought, putting her heart into her activities. Meanwhile, Zach's school life was going well. His previously gloomy expression had disappeared, and he was often seen playing happily with his friends. "Hey Mom, I'm thinking of drawing Buddy for my next art homework," Zach said excitedly. Amy felt her son's growth and was moved. That night, Amy found a small article about Greg in the newspaper. It said he was participating in a rehabilitation program in prison. Amy sighed and looked at the sleeping faces of her new family.